Hey, you made it to the last session of 2020 IT Nation Connect Virtual. Today we're going to be talking about getting started with business budgeting. Exciting stuff. Glad you made it to the end of the show just for this. My name's Rex Frank, founder and CEO of C-Level Operations. I've been in the industry just over 32 years from 1988. Started as a tech, got promoted to the service manager in the mid 2000s, really moved into the service executive role. And in 2010, I founded C-Level Operations, where we've been coaching IT solution providers and MSPs on achieving operational excellence. We've worked with about 450 companies. So I've got a pretty good experience set to share with you today. Recorded this video about a week and a half ago. I'm aiming for 45 to 50 minutes of presentation, and then we'll switch over to my private Zoom room where we'll do a live Q&A. I'll give you the link to that Zoom room at the end of the session today. Have your phones ready. There's a couple of QR codes toward the end, one for a C-level offer that you might want to choose to download, and the other is the link to the Zoom room. So have your phone ready. It might make it a little easier to capture that. As I recorded this a week and a half ago, I will be live in the chat, so we can answer some of your questions real time as we're going through the presentation, or you're viewing the presentation today. And my understanding that this session will be available in the IT Nation Connect site for about 90 days. There is a Excel worksheet that goes along with this session, so we should find it in the resources section. If it's not there, by the time this comes along, I'll have an exact answer of where to find it. I'll put it in the chat. Anyway, let's move on. So let's talk about creating your first budget. This session is really targeted at folks that haven't created a budget before, or want to just maybe pick up some tips and tricks. But as we dive in, the expectation is that this isn't going to be easy the first go around, and it's probably not even going to be that accurate. So, but there's a couple of prerequisites that it really helps if we get them in order first, right? And one of them is really understanding what your profit centers are. And in our C-level coaching, we try to get companies to line up with the service leadership model. If you're not familiar, you can go on the service-leadership.com, and they have a standardized solution provider chart of accounts. You can download that. It'll really help give you a good baseline and industry standard for your chart of accounts. If you want some help with it, the C-level coaches can help with that too. But here's the basic profit centers that we're looking to build out and build a budget around. There's two main categories: product, resale, and services. And while there are more accounts, obviously, I'm just going to focus this on an introduction level. So we're just going to really be talking about product resale in terms of hardware resale, software resale, and cloud resale. And hardware and software, that's pretty easy to follow. But the cloud resale, that's your Office 365s, or maybe a hosted faxing service, or a hosted backup, a hosted offsite data BDR service or something, right? So those are where the reseller didn't build any infrastructure in-house. You're not managing it at the client site. You're buying a cloud service from one cloud vendor and you're reselling it to your client. That really should be recorded as a product resale, a subcategory of product resale. And then in services, the three main service categories are technical services, professional services, and managed services. So technical services, that's the ad hoc, non-contract work that you do. That's where you've got a bench full of technicians and you kind of wait for the phone to ring. And when somebody says, hey, can you come fix my computer? You say, yes, we can. And you dispatch somebody to go fix that computer. And there's a ton of inefficiency when we're doing it this way, right? It's hard to keep engineers' calendars full. You're dispatching them all over the place. There's a lot of wasted windshield time. In this model, you're really happy if an engineer can bill between 4 and 5 hours of their 8-hour day that you're paying him for. And because of that, we'd expect the margins in technical services to be the lowest of any of these three categories. The second one is professional services, which is the scope project work. That's where you're agreeing in advance on a scope. You're ordering the product. It's coming in. Once the product is arrived at the client site, then we schedule the engineer to go on site and do this implementation. But then, and the other thing is typically they are working closer to 8 hours, 7 or 8 hours of their paid 8-hour day. So we would expect margins to be a little bit better in the professional services way of delivering services. But managed services, that's really where the magic can happen. If we're truly leveraging tools and technology and standardization and leveraging our lower cost resources to do predictable, repeatable tasks, we really should be able to really increase our margins in managed services. But that means we need to have an understanding of what our revenue in each of these profit centers is and what are our costs in each of these profit centers. So when we're kind of looking at setting up your chart of accounts, we should have revenue income accounts and then corresponding cost of goods sold accounts. We call those COGS accounts. And that's where our product costs would be, right? So if we sold a server, there's going to be server revenue. And there's going to be a server cost of goods sold for that hardware. In the services world, there aren't usually too many service hard costs around technical or professional services, but there may be some. But there's definitely going to be labor costs associated with delivering services. And we call that above the line. You take your revenue minus your COGS or your cost of goods sold, and that's going to get us our gross margin numbers. And then to that, we add in what we call our SG&A, our sales, general, and administrative expenses. And then whatever's left over becomes our net profit. So we call that the line. Anything above the line is our revenue and our COGS, and anything below the line is going to be our SG&A expenses. So one of the things we have to figure out, and I really, these are some prerequisites I think we have to make sure we understand in our company before we can do a budget, is what are all of our revenue line items and what are all of our cost line items and what are all of our expense line items, and make sure that we're getting them categorized in our accounting system into the right buckets, as we call them, right? So you're going to look at each revenue stream that you have, right? Every dollar that comes into your company, and we're going to decide where it goes. And there's a couple of gotchas that are common discussions we have while we're doing our coaching around these topics. And Office 365 is not managed services. Yes, it is recurring, but it's not a managed service, right? Product resale, we're looking for 20% margins or something like that, where in managed services, we're looking for more like 60, 65, 70% margins. And if you mix the two together, you're actually deflating your managed services margins, which is not something we do not want to do. So even though it's recurring, that does not make it managed services. That is a product resale, typically cloud resale, that happens to be recurring. And then HaaS and SaaS, right? Hardware as a service and software as a service. They're not all that money is not all service revenue. It has two distinct components. One component happens to be a recurring product resale, which again should have its 20-ish% margins. And then the other component of it is the services that are related to that. And that should be down in your services, likely in your managed services, a component of your managed services. So as you're thinking about how do we take all these individual line items and put them in a bucket, antivirus is one of the ones I like to kind of call out as an example to help stimulate some thinking around this, right? So the business software expense. So your MSP is a company. You have employees, and those employees have computers. And if you want to put antivirus on their desktop, that is a software business expense. It's no different than you buy a license for QuickBooks or an accounting package, and that's a software expense for your company. That's going to be below the line in SG&A. But on the other hand, if a client calls and says, hey, I'd like to buy 100 licenses of Symantec antivirus so we can install it out here in our network, and you say, great, you call distribution, you get a cost, you turn that into a quote or proposal, you give it to your client, they sign off on it, and you sell that to them, right? You're buying it from distribution. That's a software resale cost of goods sold. You sell it to your client, that's software resale revenue. But on the other hand, let's say you decide you have a managed service and you're selling a managed user, a managed workstation for $200 a month. And one component of that is your standardized solution stack where you're putting, say, Symantec antivirus on every one of the computers out there in the world that you manage. And we record that as managed services revenue of $200 a month per desktop. But that antivirus license is going to go down as a managed services hard cost of goods sold. So hopefully that's starting to shed a little light on how we decide what our budgets are, as we need to match how we're tracking these things in our accounting system so we can accurately understand the margins in each of our profit centers. So one thing we need to do is we need to look at every line item in our accounting system that we're recording as a cost of goods sold or as an expense, and verify that it's going in the right bucket that's aligned with the profit center. And it's likely that your current chart of accounts or profit and loss statement is not properly aligned with your profit centers. It's very normal that we need to start with the chart of accounts project to get that lined up. At C-Level, we are very familiar with doing that. We do that over and over, and we can help you with that. Or you can go to service-leadership.com, get the standardized solution provider chart of accounts and work through it on your own. Regardless, we want to get them lined up with what your profit centers are. Another common thing that we run into is the service labor. It's very common to incorrectly have labor below the line in SG&A in some account that's typically called payroll expense. And that's not where payroll for your engineers goes. Payroll for your salespeople and payroll for your admin overhead people, they do go down in SG&A, but payroll for the engineers, they are your cost of goods sold against that service revenue. So you need to have some methodology for gathering data and understanding, hey, I've got an engineer that spent 50% of their time doing managed services, 20% of their time in professional services, and the rest of their time in technical services. So we need to split up that engineer's salary between those three categories. And if you're not sure how to do that, C-Level can definitely help you get that figured out. But it's the only way you're going to understand your margins in each of those categories. And we'll also like to point out that your dispatcher and your service manager are required. You have to have those positions in order to deliver that service, which means that those positions are a cost of goods sold. They should not be down in your SG&A. They're not in your management and admin SG&A. They are in your service cost of goods sold. So, make sure that we're accounting for that properly as you're designing your chart of accounts, designing your profit and loss statement, and designing your first budget. Let's see, a good idea, a good way to help make sure you have everything accounted for in your budget is to, like I said, kind of go through that profit and loss statement and look at the individual line items and make sure that they're getting categorized into the correct profit center. And another way to find stuff is to maybe look at your company's credit card statement where you have all your recurring charges, and kind of make sure that each of them are landing in your chart of accounts in the right bucket in your P&L. So we want to make sure that these things are right and that we're accounting for things according to an industry standard before we try to attempt to do a budgeting process. Another common thing that we run into when we're trying to look at an existing P&L and create a budget based on that is deferred revenue is often handled incorrectly. So cash does not become income, or cash becomes income when you deliver the product or the service to the client, right? So if you do some kind of a down payment, right? Like if you say, I'm going to do a $20,000 project for this client, I'm going to send an invoice for half up front. I'm going to send them an invoice for $10,000. We should not be recording that as income at that time. That's deferred revenue that we put on the balance sheet. And then when we deliver that project, we invoice against that down payment, and that consumes the money off of the balance sheet and into our income account as revenue. And it's really, really important that we are matching revenue and COGS in the same month, right? And One way that gets out of whack is with prepaid expenses. Maybe you have some service that you pay for a year's worth of something in January. Well, that's not a cost of goods sold in January, right? That's what we call a prepaid expense. We need to put that on the balance sheet as a prepaid expense and then move it into cost of goods sold or move it into expenses 1/12 each month, right? And then we consume that prepaid expense. So at the end of the year, the prepaid expense account is 0, and each month has 1/12 of that cost. So, and when it comes to matching revenue and COGS, a very common thing is, oh, the client, bought some new servers, so we gave them an invoice at the end of November, and then they paid it, right? That's not November income, because then we ordered it December 1st and shipped it to them December 10th. Our cost of goods sold is going to be in December. So when we try to look at a profit and loss statement, we see all this revenue in November, looks like we did amazing, and we see all this cost of goods sold with no revenue in December, and it looks like we lost our butts, right? So it's really important that we have accounting controls in place, that we're recognizing revenue and cost of goods sold in the same period, and that way we have a rational P&L to work from as we're doing our business budgeting. Like I alluded to when we started this talk, expect your first year to be very difficult, right? I would expect maybe about a 60% accuracy. And in your first year, you're going to feel like there is just no way to look at a crystal ball and guess what our revenue is going to look like throughout the next 12 months, right? You're really going to feel like this is a pointless exercise. But the thing is you're going to do your best and just know it's probably going to be 60% accurate. And then throughout the year, as you're trying to match up what actually happened compared to what you forecasted, you're going to find a lot of errors, and you're going to find a lot of things that you learn, and you'll do them better throughout the remainder of the year, and you'll do them better. You'll have a better idea how to budget the following year. As you start to do your budget for the second year, it's going to be a lot better. You will have learned a lot, and my general expectation is that you should be able to come within about 85% of your budget. In November, December, you create your budget for the following year, and then you live the year. I would expect in most categories you should be within about 15% plus or minus. But by the time you get in your third year, you're probably going to find that you've gotten better. Your crystal ball is polished up. It's looking a lot more clear. And I would expect that you should be able to be about 95% accurate. And if you really want to get accurate budgets, as Paul Dipple likes to talk about with service leadership, tie your executive compensation to budget attainment. And that is when you're ready to do that, that's when you know your budgets are going to be accurate and they're going to make sense. And what I mean by that is, if they come in at budget, they get a better bonus than if they miss their budget. You'd be surprised how accurate you can get. So let's take a look at the worksheet. And again, you should have been able to download this worksheet. Hopefully by now, if it's not in the resources section like I think it's going to be, I've given you a link that you can download it somehow. But anyway, let's take a look at the worksheet. So when you open up your worksheet, you should see this spreadsheet, and it's going to have a cover page. It's going to have an instructions tab. And again, this is provided by my company, C-Level Operations. It's going to have some purpose. It's going to have some instructions. But over here is where the magic happens. This will be the sample budget. And this, for a lot of you, I realize this might be your first time looking at a budget. But what we're going to do is in column B here, we're going to put in last year's annual totals. So this happens to be a fictitious $1.5 million firm. We've got 192,000 coming from product resale and about 1.3 million coming from services. And here we've got some hardware resale, we've got some software resale, we've got some cloud resale, and then technical services, professional services, and managed services, right? So this is sort of our revenue or our income section of how we finished up last year. We're then going to budget out our services side, right? Or our cost of goods sold. And we're going to start with our product in this section. Down here is going to be our services. So in the technical services, right, this is our ad hoc break fix work. There's normally not very much hard cost. We'll find that there's, again, our margins are lower, so our cost numbers are going to be a lot closer to our revenue numbers in technical services. In professional services, again, there's probably not very many hard costs there. Like one example is, let's say you're doing a cabling project and you have to go rent a scissor lift for the weekend. And so that would be a hard cost, that scissor lift rental. If there's any specialty tools that you use, like we used to do these server migration projects, or maybe it's a Skykick license that you're not building into, you're not actually selling that. You're just using the Skykick license as a tool to help you do that migration faster, kind of thing. And then here's your direct labor, right? This would be your project managers in professional services. This would be your, if there's any dispatch involved, it would be any engineer labor. That would all be a cost of goods sold to deliver that professional service. And then we've got managed services, hard cost. This is a number that's usually somewhere around 10%, something like that. For this fictitious company, I just took the revenue number times 0.01. As long as you're typing anything within these blue cells, you're not going to break the calculations in the spreadsheet. If you start typing outside of these blue cells, you're probably going to break some formulas someplace. So be careful with that. I chose not to lock the spreadsheet because I want you to be able to edit it and add lines and make it fit the way you do business. As with any of the C-level provided documents, we always believe our content is probably about 80% of what any individual company is going to be right for them. Anyway, so now right here in this section, we've got some calculations about what kind of margins we produced, what were our hardware margins or our product resale margins, what were our service margins, and then our combined margins, right? So in this case, we were producing a 48.5% margin. Then we start adding in our expenses, and there are a lot more expense accounts than this. For this sample and for an introduction session that we're doing today, I tried to keep it pretty simple. But we got sales and marketing, admin and management, and as you can see in this column E, well, we'll look at that in a minute because I believe that's based on the next one. Sorry about that. I'll get there in a minute. So this is our annual, and most of these, they have a formula in them, but they're not intended to be a formula. If we sold 60, well, let's use the managed services number here, right? We did at $1.1 million in managed services last year. The average, right, taking that number divided by 12 is about $91,000 a month, okay? But it very well could be that you started the year with $75,000 a month and you're ending the year at $120,000 a month. So your average was 91. And so I wouldn't want to have my starting place, at 91, which is the average. I would rather put my starting place at 120,000, right? And that way, because this is going to be the starting place that we're going to start for our January budget. So you're going to fill that out the best you can and put your numbers in as to where we're starting, like what's January going to look like, or what did December look like might be a better way to look at it. And as you go through here, you've kind of got two options. You're going to fill these out the best you can, projecting COGS all the way down, okay? And this is going to basically do a couple of calculations for you so you can kind of see where you're going to be. And then, and make sure, like if you're adjusting this to managed services revenue, maybe we decide to make that the 100,000. Your COGS associated with it will probably need to not be an average either. They'll probably need to be more in line with what that new number is you put up here, right? So you want to be making sure that your margins and everything are coming out correctly as you're kind of building out your starting point. The next thing you're going to want to do is look at what kind of a growth trend that you're expecting. So in this scenario, we've got, we're doing $5,000 a month in hardware, and we would expect that to not grow at a compound rate. This is simple growth, not compound growth, is the way this spreadsheet is built. But so we expect to do another 5%. So in this scenario, we're adding 5% of $5,000. So in January, we expect to do 5,250. In February, we expect to add another 250 to that, which would be 5,500. In March, we expect to add another $250 to that, which would be 5,750. So this particular spreadsheet is designed to just add 5% of this starting point each month. Just so you can kind of wrap your head around how that formula is designed. You can always edit it. If you wanted it to be compound, you would just use a different formula here. But the other thing you can do is take a look. Like, it's very common for people to be phasing out technical services, right? So here we've said, well, this is what we achieved at the end of this year, but going forward, we expect about a 5% decrease in our technical services revenue going forward. So you can see that the number is actually decreasing. And up here, if I look down at some of my expenses, you'll see that I didn't put anything here. I decided that this is just going to be our rent, our office expense, our occupancy expense is $3,000 a month. That's not going to change. So I can just delete that cell and it'll just stay a constant $3,000 all the way across, right? Another thing, I could do, and it's interesting, if we know the rent's going to go up in June to 3,500, I could change it right here. And the way the formula works, it's going to carry that 3,500 all the way across for the rest of the year. Okay. Just kind of be aware of kind of how that works. In this scenario, I wanted to say, hey, our starting point was 16,000, but I wanted to override this to be just a flat 20,000, every month. That's a number that's not going to change. So I could type a number there. You're probably going to have to go up here and switch this to $1 instead of a percent in the cell to make it make sense. But that's one way. Another way to do that would be just to set this to 0 and set this to 20,000. That would accomplish the same thing, right? It would just carry itself across. But what we're trying to do with our crystal ball is predict an increase or decrease in revenue, and then predict a percentage increase or decrease or stays the same in our COGS and in our expenses. And it's very interesting to watch, right? A percentage increase in revenue or cost, right? Increasing gross margin. And then because everything is percentage based, it's going to have a different impact down here, right? Like, I'm looking at this and this is probably not reasonable the way I've got stuff in here right now, to go from a 13% net profit and grow like this up to a 30% net profit within a year. Like, there's going to be something wrong with this budget. I would not expect this to be able to move like that. There's just too much growth there. We've made a mistake in either our revenue, or we've made a mistake in our COGS or something, because gross margins don't change this fast, and expenses, net profits generally don't change this fast. So play with these numbers and model them. And remember, what you're setting is if I expect my cost to only go up by 25%, or here, where's my cost? If I expect my managed services cost to go up by 20%, I probably need to expect my managed services cost to go up by that, or something like that. Or I need to make some tough decisions. I'm going to say, okay, I'm only going to project my COGS going up by 17%, even though the revenue is going up by 20%. But the reason that's going to happen is we're going to invest in leveraging tools and technology and standardization. And, there's got to be some decision and action that you put in place to justify that you don't think that that's going to be proportional as you go up. Okay, so that's sort of how you look in your crystal ball and try to decide what's going to happen with our budget. So then, as each month goes by, we're going to do a budget analysis. We're going to determine how close did we come to our budget. Now, I've got this big yellow note up here because you should not have to be entering any of this data in a spreadsheet like this to do analysis, right? We create our sample budget. We go into QuickBooks or Xero or whatever accounting system you're using, and you input all of these numbers into your next year's budget. And then as you go through the month and you're recording income and costs and expenses into your accounting system, you should be able to simply just go run a budget analysis report, and it'll produce this report for you. So here is our budget, right? Everything in columns B, F, J, they're all being fed from whatever you typed in over here in your budget. And then we go through the month and we sell things, and we have costs, and we record things, and it's going to produce a budget variance report. Is going to show us that, hey, we thought we were going to have $5,200 of revenue. We ended up with an actual $6,000 of revenue. So we're over budget, right? Which is a good thing, right? I've got the green. Any number over 100% is formatted green in this spreadsheet, and that's a good thing. Here's one where we're a little under budget, right? We budgeted $12,000 of revenue for cloud resale. We came in at 11.5. It's red because we came in a little under budget on the revenue. It's interesting though. It's green up here in revenue. It's green if it's above 100% and red if it's below. But down here in COGS and expenses, the greens and the reds flip. In our expense line, it's green if it's under 100% and red if it's over 100%. So here we're looking at, we were expecting our hardware COGS to be 43.75. We came in at 38.22. We're at 87% of budget. That's a good thing. So, and again, you can kind of model how far off you are from budget as we go all the way down. In this case, we were forecasting a $20,000 profit. We came in at a $34,000 profit. We were at 167% of budget. So again, this is how you're going to do the analysis. And like I said, in that first month, you're probably going to be, up to 40% off, either at 140% or at 60%, right? Your variances in your first year of trying to manage to a budget are going to be pretty big. But you're going to learn, like, wow, what made me not come that close to my budget? And as you do these month over month, you'll get better at managing to a budget, and then you'll get better the following year at setting your budgets. So hopefully that's helpful in understanding how to make your way through your first set of budgets. So as we wrap things up, I have an offer for you. You're welcome to download this. It's a free offer. Go to clevelops.com/key decisions. And I put together an offer where I outline some key decisions that the business owners and their service executives need to make, and kind of how they need to be on the same path as they're increasing the maturity level of the company and ultimately increasing the valuation of the company. So take a look at that if you like. Again, it's a free download. I'm going to ask, please fill out your session survey. Those definitely help us at ConnectWise, and helps ConnectWise figure out if I'm doing a good job or not, and whether I get invited back to do more content with you guys. I should have my Zoom room open by now, so you should be ready. I should be ready and waiting for you guys to join for any kind of a live Q&A. We'll do that as long as you guys want to stay. Also, here's another link to that Key Decisions download if you're interested in that. But this QR code will take you into the Zoom room. I really hope that you guys enjoyed IT Nation Connect. I know I had a great time presenting. And I look forward to seeing you guys at either one of the share user groups or maybe even explore next year. And I'm got my fingers crossed we'll be face to face instead of talking to this camera. All right, talk to you guys later. Bye.